I think for whatever reason, everything that I've been through in life has prepared me to be a leader. And I just feel this is what I'm supposed to be doing. When you can match your everyday actions with your core values and those things are in alignment, that's like a very, very unique position to be in. And that's kind of where I'm at right now. And then I really think the first one, how I handled the challenge of my number being out of my hands is like really trying to empower the team and let them have the autonomy and the freedom to create and make mistakes, And I think when you create that environment, I think people start to, get more creative and have that energy that they can, feel like, hey, maybe I can figure this out on my own. Maybe I don't need to have my manager do every single thing for me, which I think is a really important boundary to set.
Welcome to the Ronen Pessar podcast, where we explore the skills of emotional intelligence that can be used to improve outcomes at work or at home. All right, we are here with the one and only Anthony Natoli. I'm super stoked about this, but if you don't already know who he is and you haven't been following his journey and path on LinkedIn, you are in for a treat. You got to go check him out, Anthony Natoli. Anthony, I'll pass it over to you, man. Tell us a little bit about who you are and where you're at right now in life.
Yeah. Oh, man. Tell them a little bit about who I am. Well, we could be here for days discussing that. But yeah, so right now I'm an SDR leader at a company called QA Wolf. I got into SDR leadership on a very non-traditional path about 6 months ago. And just to back up a little bit about my career and how I kind of got here, graduating college, like many people, I had no idea what I wanted to do. And through one way or the other, through a friend, I got into sales in San Francisco in it was 2015. So that was like the prime time of like tech blowing up, especially living in San Francisco. I thought I was going to be working for like a fintech mortgage company, but it ended up just being cold calling mortgage brokers and cold emailing mortgage brokers and getting yelled at. For anyone who knows the mortgage industry, they're not like the most pleasant people. So I did that for about 3 years. And then I got into a traditional SaaS SDR role at a company called Demandbase. Was really able to use like the acumen I built from that mortgage sales job to really excel in my career as an SDR. A lot of the intangibles that people talk about, like grit, persistence, being very intentional with what I wanted. I was very adamant from day one I wanted to get promoted to AE. Did that in 9 months. And, quick story there for any SDRs listening about things that you can do to stand out. I remember, I think I was in month 3 and I volunteered to speak at a company town hall. And I regretted that as soon as I grabbed the mic in front of 250 people, both remote and in person. I was like, what did I do? But it ended up being the first step of getting my name on the map. The CEO recognized me, the CRO, and that just like was a spiral building my personal brand internally, which we can get into. So after getting promoted, I spent before I got moved into leadership role, I spent the last 5 years as an AE, all the way from mid-market to enterprise at 3 different companies, Demandbase, Outreach, and most recently Lattice. For me, the last couple of years as an AE, there was just something missing. When I would close a deal, it would be like, great. And then 30 seconds later, I'd be like, what's next? And I just like didn't have that fulfillment. I love being on a team, but something was missing. And, I've been through a bunch of personal stuff in my life, as many people listening know, and but for those who don't, I 3.5 years ago basically hit my rock bottom, where struggled with gambling addiction, overeating, really toxic relationship with myself. And here I am on the outside looking in. You would think everything's great. I got a 6-figure AE job, living in San Francisco, but I was really broken inside. And I went through a very rigorous self-discovery journey the last 3.5 years. And the last 2 of that 3.5 years as an AE, I really figured out in my personal life, what were my goals, my core values, my beliefs and what brought me purpose and fulfillment, and it just wasn't aligned anymore. So I'll try to speed it up a little bit, but fast forward, working at Outreach as an AE, I started building my brand on my personal brand on LinkedIn. Started talking about prospecting because I was really confident that I could help people with outbound prospecting and tips and sharing my struggles in my personal life as well. And something clicked, right? I started getting messages from people, hey, your email template or your story really resonated. I was able to do X, Y, and Z, which helped me hit my quota, whatever. And I was like, oh, that's what's missing. That feedback from others, giving back to other people. And so I tried to think, what do I have a lot of skills in that I'm confident to help others? And where can I get that fulfillment from helping other people in my full-time role? And I thought SDR leadership was the perfect route. Unfortunately, that path didn't exist at Lattice most recently. And so I jumped ship, and a company took a chance on me as a first-time leader. And I've learned a ton, which I'm sure we'll get into. But yeah, it's been a very interesting journey that I think, for whatever reason, everything that I've been through in life has prepared me to be a leader. And I just feel this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And when you can match your everyday actions with your core values and those things are in alignment, that's like a very, very unique position to be in. And that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Yeah. And I want to get into that because that's a huge piece of leadership that is often so out of whack, which is your alignment. It's easy to fall into the trap of like wanting to be everything for everyone. And especially like me, if you're a recovering people pleaser, someone who's like, you want to make sure everyone feels great about you. So you don't say no to things. You don't have good boundaries. And then that spills over into your personal life, your health, your well-being. But I mean, your personal story and path is something that I could say personally has inspired me as you've shared that publicly. I struggle with my own challenges, but just reading about how you've shared your story about your rock bottom and how you've come back from that, it gives me hope to know that the things that I'm struggling with are all things I can overcome. It will take intention, maybe hard work to get there, but I really appreciate it. I know a lot of the people who probably follow you appreciate that as well. The fact that you're willing to go there and talk about the challenges, because no one goes through life untested. No one goes through life without these struggles. And in some ways, the best leaders are born out of these really dark personal moments where then you can understand and have more empathy for the people you're working for and working with. And it's like, that is the thing we all want in our leaders. These empathy, high IQ and high EQ leaders who can both know the plan and what to do and how to do it well. They can demonstrate, if you're, leading SDRs, how do you do prospecting? How do you do cold calling? What do I do when I'm writing cold emails? Or it's like you're in a one-on-one and you're just like getting into it about like, hey, Johnny, it seems like you've been really like not yourself these last 3 weeks. What's going on? I know these signs. I know something's off. Are you taking care of yourself? And being able to have that experience to then reflect outwards and be able to identify what's going on for other people is what great leaders do. And I actually do want to pivot into that a little bit, if it's all right with you, which is, I know you're here, you finally got to this path, and it's pretty amazing that you've identified for yourself that the thing that was missing wasn't the huge commission checks, closing deals. I'm sure if you stayed the path, you would have been the next $1 million plus rep a year, no doubt in my mind. But you were like, hey, this isn't fulfilling. This isn't aligned with my personal values. What is it about being in this leadership position is more fulfilling for you?
Yeah, so I think if I'm being completely honest, another thing too is I think the pressure of being an AE was just like, I was kind of over it, and I was ready for the pressure and the hard that comes with being a leader, right? I think I was ready for that step. And so, yeah, I think, what I really enjoy about it is like, I get to understand the individual, this team, especially when you're inheriting a team, like where are they at? What do they struggle with? What motivates them? How do they like to get feedback? and like really like how can I use my experience to help grow and develop these individuals, right? Like understanding what their aspirations are. One of my favorite questions I asked recently, I was like, hey, let's say you hit your number this month, like what are you doing with that commission check? Like what does that mean to you? One
It's a
person
great
told
question.
me, one person's like, hey, I want to retire early. Someone's like, I gotta pay off student loans. And then you can like feed into that and use that as motivation and really like helping people see the job and the role as not just a way to pay the bills or to make a lot of money, but tying it back to like your why and like why are you showing up every day. I think another really awesome part of the role is that it forces me to take care of myself. Like I need to be the best version of Anthony in order to show up for everyone else.
Mm.
I've noticed in previous leaders that I've had when their energy is off, I'm off. Um,
I want to
and
put I want to double
yeah,
click into that real quickly because like you actually just said something huge. There was a moment when pre-COVID when we were all in the office. I was working at a company called Security Scorecard. We had this beautiful office, Midtown Manhattan, across the street from Macy's. And at that time, I had a team of like, I don't know, 18 or 20 SDRs or something. And I don't know what was going on, but I walked into the office and I was the kind of person who would walk in and every single person I saw would smile, say, good morning, how are you? And I came in, I brought the energy every single day. For whatever reason, this day wasn't the case. And later in that day, I had a one-on-one with someone and she was like, what's going on with you? It seems like everything is off. And I was like, I kind of dismissed it and I just kind of kept moving. And she made sure to tell me why it mattered. And she was like, everyone draws off your energy. When you're the leader, you actually have to be self-aware enough to understand that your tone sets the tone for everyone else. So if you
100%.
show up and you're being negative, angry, frustrated, how do you think the rest of the team? It's the same thing with parenting. For those of you who have kids that are watching this, it's like your kids don't do what you say, they do what you do. They model after your behavior, and that's innate in our brains, the way we operate. So, I mean, it's amazing to hear you say that you've picked up on that. I mean, that's a huge, huge nugget for any good leaders. They know that like they're the ones setting the tone and their team will mirror and kind of copy and set forth. So what do you do? How do you make sure to keep yourself in that place where you're able to be the best Anthony?
Yeah. Before we get into that, it's so funny. There's days where I catch myself. I'm like, all right, like, I gotta be the confident Anthony, the leader here. Even sometimes when I don't feel like it, and I just want to like I want to push all my one-on-ones and just like take a break. But you gotta show up.
You
So
got
the
it.
things that I do. Again, I don't want to sound like a morning routine guru here, but I found the things that have honestly worked for me. I wake up at 5:30, and the reason I wake up at 5:30 is because I like to go to the gym in the morning. I like an hour to myself before I go to the gym. So what I do is I go outside on my deck. Maybe I'll like pray a little bit. Maybe I'll do breath work. Maybe I'll just stare at the sun and just like this morning I was like happy tears. I was just like reminiscing on the progress and how much gratitude I have. Because it's so easy to get caught up in the fast pace, the goals, the things haven't happened yet, and it can really stress you out. And so for me, it's so important to have that hour where I can just ground myself and
Mm.
remember like where I'm at and accept where I'm at and realize that things could be so much worse and I have so much to be grateful for. And that allows me to like let the little things not really bother me during the day because I can come back to that. So I go to the gym. These are like all things during the day, like the micro. I like to like yesterday. I had a enablement session with my team, and I was like, I'm going on a walk after this. Like everyone else should like get out of the house too for 30 minutes if you can. Like I think just setting that tone and leading by example is what you need to do. And in the macro, I I try to, drink a ton of water during the day because it helps me keep my mind clear. I try to
Mm.
eat healthy to take care of my body because I think that feeds the mind as well. Um, and I go to therapy, at least 2 times a month. I used to do it every week. But that has been the biggest thing for me is being able to recognize that like, hey, I need help, like I need help, and I'm going to not leave it up to Anthony to make the decisions, because I've seen what's happened in the past when I try to do everything on my own. I talk to my mom and dad every single day. I try to text a friend here and there, but it's all centered and anchored on things that serve me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and when I don't do those things, I see my energy is off. So like, better off doing the things, even on the days I don't feel like it. Most days I don't feel like getting up at 5:30. I just want to sleep. But I know that 12 o'clock's gonna roll around, and I'm gonna feel that
Yeah.
resentment and be like, damn, wish I went. Now I'm a little pissed.
Yeah.
Energy is off. It's in the back of my head. So those are some of the things that I do.
That's an important piece too, what you just said. Sticking to your routine so you don't resent the way you're spending your time, and then that comes out in who you're interacting with midway through the day. When I have my mornings where I've hit everything, I've got 2 little kids under 4 and a third on the way. So it's like, I don't really have much of a morning after 6:37. They're already up and ready. But
Yeah.
if I'm lucky enough to be up at 5:30, I do the same thing. Time for myself to do something before the kids are ready. And, but it's all the same, right? Like if you don't get to that 1 or 2 main thing, even if it's just 5 minutes of journaling, I do gratitude journaling. That makes all the difference before I get into the day. Start the day on the right foot. It's funny. Curious to hear what you think about this, but as a seller, as an AE, your value comes from all the stuff you externally are able to do, right? Your value that you provide comes from all the activities you're able to do, the follow-up, the good discovery, closing deals, the prospecting. As a leader, your value you can create comes from the internal work that you're able to master. The best leaders show up with such a strong energy and power that only comes from one place. It comes from their internal self, their internal strength, their internal confidence. And don't get me wrong, like a lot of us have imposter syndrome in leadership. And if you're anything like me, I mean, this might sound common to you as well, but one way that shows up is you feel like you have to know everything. So like as soon as someone is like, hey, I saw there's this new technology that does like outbound cold calling, like are we already looking at that? Or, oh, I saw this approach that I want to try. What do you know about it? The insecure leader in me wants to say, oh yeah, I know all about it, and I'll start spewing BS, which you can see through. But the secure leader would say something like, hey, I actually don't know much about that. What do you know about it? Where did you learn about it from? And they get curious, and they show up with a curious mindset. But yeah,
100%.
I mean, taking it back to you and to your team, what is one of the things that, as soon as you moved over into this leadership role, what was like one of the biggest things you were like, oh man, I did not see this coming, like did not expect this to be a challenge? And I'm curious to also hear how you might have handled it.
Yeah, I think the shift from you're responsible for your own number and then other people being responsible for your number and it's kind of out of your hands. I think that was a big challenge. And then the other challenge that I had was, realizing that everyone has things that are strengths, everyone has things that are weaknesses, and it's a very individualized plan for how you interact with people. Someone may be like really really good at cold emailing, and someone may not be, and the opposite is true with cold calling. And so one of the things that I try to do is like a skill assessment and an audit, and just see where people are at, and let the data drive how I'm coaching folks. Like that's huge for me, is letting the data dictate what I'm doing and not just taking a blanketed approach. And then I really think the first one, how I handled the challenge of my number being out of my hands, is like really trying to empower the team and let them have the autonomy and the freedom to create and make mistakes. In the beginning I would always get like, hey, what should I say in response to this email? How should I overcome this objection? My immediate response was like, oh, tap me in, let me do it. And then instead I've made the shift to, hey, you take the first stab at it. How do you think you should respond? Right? And then it allows them to kind of coach themselves and give themselves feedback. And then I can jump in and say, hey, this is what I would do differently. But you can't do everything for them, right? Like that, I wanted to do everything from the beginning for them because I wanted control. But you need
Mm-hmm.
to let them, you need to let your team, you owe it to them to let them send the email and to make the call and to be okay with like knowing that if you mess up or do something, it's okay. We can correct it, but you need to take that first step. And I can't hold your hand every single minute of the day. And I think when you create that environment, I think people start to, get more creative and have that energy that they can, feel like, hey, maybe I can figure this out on my own. Maybe I don't need to to have my manager do every single thing for me, which I think is a really important boundary to set.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so what do you do to create that environment? It's easy to be the person who, by the way, I was that person too. I'll do it all. Sure. Like, let me respond to you. I'm available 24/7. And then you end up getting those people on the team who like don't stop and they're constantly asking you things. But the fact that
Yep.
you identified that and you've made this shift, and that's called learned helplessness for those who are wondering, like, what's that? That's a term I've heard that I love. So learned helplessness is like, I've learned to be helpless. And then they rely on you basically as the answer for everything. So what do you make sure as best as you can that's true within the environment of your team to support the don't be afraid to mess up. Don't be afraid to try things out.
Yeah. We're big on acting like scientists. So like I always have the team run their own experiments and own tests. And I also have them audit the experiment, right? Not just me digging into the data, but what's your conclusion? Like why don't you think where you want to be? Or like if someone crushed it, I say, hey, why do you think you did well this month? I don't need to tell them. I want them to come to their own conclusion to build that self-awareness, right? The other thing too with the slacks, especially in a remote environment, hey, I got this email, like what should I do? What should I say? What do you think about this email? And I'm like, well, what do you think about it? Why, like we built an email outbound email reply channel and objection channel. And instead of going to me, I say, go like take your first stab at it. Put the email in and say, here's how I was thinking about responding. I'm open to feedback. That's what you need to do. Instead of me being like, hey, change this, this, and this. No, you take the first stab at editing it or making the changes or giving yourself feedback, and then I'm willing to jump in. I always remembered I had a manager at Outreach who I was like very guilty of like, hey, what do you think we should? Like, how do you think we should run this call? We've got the CRO on. He's like, well, how do you think we should handle it? And it allowed me to like expand my brain and really think about it, and not just like
Totally.
try to take the easy way out. So I think that's the culture that I've tried to build, that ownership piece.
It was a little bit maybe too far, but I had a giant sign on my wall when we were in the office that said, "I'm not Google." So it was like, look, if you've got a question, the first thing I'm going to ask you to any question is, what have you already done?
Yep.
And that's one of the ways to try to rewire. And look, this might sound, this is the hard part, like all good things, like cold calling or whatever. It's all about your delivering your tone. Also, if you can show
Mm-hmm.
up with the right tone when you're saying these things, it doesn't come off as being a jerk. Rather, it's supportive. So if someone on your team goes, hey, Anthony, like, I just got this reply. I don't know how to handle this objection. Like, what should I say? What should I say? And they're like slacking you screenshots or whatever, copying, pasting it in there. If you start with, how do you want to approach that? What have you already done? Tell me what you've already done and where you're at, so that if you've done nothing, I'm not your first option, right? The first option is, can you do some quick Googling? Is there someone on the team who can help? I love the fact that you've got channels for that. That's brilliant. One of the best things that I've done for my time as a leader is you crowdsource some of the stuff with other people. Like, why not? There are people who are going to know answers to these things. And then
Totally.
long term, that could become a playbook too. You can turn that into a document, a Google Sheet. The Google Sheet could then go on to like a Google site. And then you can have a living playbook. hey, by the way, anytime you get this objection, go check the playbook. We've got some good answers in there. Let me know if you have questions on it afterwards.
Yep. And it's funny because that's one of the first things that one of our co-founders who leads our growth team had me do. He's like, hey, instead of you having to answer these questions over and over and over again, he's like, build out the playbook. Like, write it all out. And that way your team can go back to it. And I was like, that's a brilliant idea. That's exactly what I did. And I can point them to that. And it's like, hey, how do I find new accounts, for a new hire that I may have? It's like, okay, it's already built out, and it takes a lot of the stress off of you, is like having things in writing.
Yeah.
Built out.
And for those of you like business geeks like me who are all about like standard operating procedures and documenting everything so that you can scale a business, it doesn't have to be hard or complex. By the way, business idea, I've been dreaming of this for years. If someone can build it, that'd be amazing. A virtual shadow that just documents everything you do all day.
That would be nice.
Right? Yeah. I'm telling you that there's $1 billion idea on that one, but I don't know how to deploy it. But the idea is like, look, your documentation doesn't have to be tough. I'll give you an example. If you're living in virtual land and you do a lot of Zooms, record your sessions. After you record it, download it, put it in a Google Doc somewhere, make the link shareable, and then title it, here's how you do whatever that session was about. If it was about objection handling, if it was about writing emails or prospecting, or even if it was like technical, how to set yourself up in your sales engagement platform, or how to do something. If I did a lot of that, and over the time, when you do it once and you start having these things recorded, and even if they're not pretty, you start to string them all together as almost done for you. And then at that point, the last thing you need to do is just sift through it once in a while to make sure it's still relevant and still the right process. But that's a great hack to save some time so you don't have to teach something and then also create the same thing as a standard operating procedure for everyone else to follow, or a playbook.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, Loom has been my best friend.
Yeah, that's awesome. Big fan of that. We've got about enough time for like maybe one or two more topics, but I want to actually shift into something that I think isn't necessarily an easy topic to talk about. So, all right, you've got that super high performer on your team, and they're doing great work for you. In fact, maybe you'll call them an A player. They're the kind of person that you don't need to check in with a lot. They've got it. They're always at the top of the leaderboard. They're doing all the right things. But that person is also super ambitious. And every time you sit down for the one-on-one, what are they asking you? It's like, hey,
promotion.
How do you handle that? What do you do?
Yeah.
How do you not lose face as the leader, while also making sure, because the fear is, I don't want this person to lose their mojo. They're my top person, but I also can't make stuff up. So what do you do?
Yeah, 100%, man. I think this is where my experience of moving from SDR to AE and having that perspective has been huge. I'm of the camp that I said this to my team on day one. I said, I think all of you are great, but I don't want to work with each of you forever. And that set the tone, because like, I want them to go and do bigger and better things, and I'm here to support and help. I think for our business specifically, I started in March and inherited a team, and we were coming off like our worst month. They just lost their previous manager. So like the conversation of career development like wasn't top of mind. People were wanting to get back to hitting their quotas consistently, and we had to make a lot of process changes and audits. But once we've kind of got back to baseline, that conversation started to come up again. And the first thing that I said, I was like, okay, what does a promotion mean to you? Like define that. What do you want to do? I want to be an AE. Well, why? Have you met with the AE manager? Do you know about the role? Are you meeting with an AE? Like, what are the things that you're doing right now to set yourself up? And, that helped me identify where the gaps are in our career growth process. And so actually recently, I started to understand like, what do people want to do next? And a part of our one-on-one now are things centered around that. So one of our like top BDRs, he wants to be an AE. So I built out like a mentorship program where he's meeting with one of the AEs every month because he's the closest to promotion. I made him buy the Medic book, and I'm giving him specific things to listen to in Gong, and I'm giving him that extra TLC to feel like he is doing things outside of the very mundane role of being a BDR, and giving him that path and clear expectations. Another one of my BDRs wants to get into BDR leadership. So I had her do our July meeting booked audit and present it to the team. And then I shared the deck in our sales channel to celebrate her and, help build her brand. So it's all about understanding what folks want out of their career and then helping them come up with a plan to get there, but empowering them to take the steps to do it on their own. And I think the last thing to wrap it all up, you need to have clear expectations. People want to know where they stand. Hey, if it's not going to be till 2024, tell me. If we don't have headcount, tell me. If I need to do this for another 6 months and blah, 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 tell me. Like, I want to know exactly what I need to do to get there. And in the meantime, I want your help to learn new things and develop me in different ways. And I think it's that balance of, hey, like you could easily default to, hey, you're not really hitting your numbers, so like we probably shouldn't be talking about that. But showing them that you care about them and what's next in their career is going to help them care about their current role more, because they're going to want to succeed. They're going to want to feel motivated to get to that next level. So it's that balance of making time for those conversations while still making sure that they're still doing the job that needs, the job to be done, which is, getting qualified meetings and being a good team player and demonstrating the company values on a daily basis.
One of the worst things a leader can do is to string someone along and then be found out, because essentially you're going to lose all that faith and trust. It's like a bank account, if you withdraw from it in one shot by doing something that was like not being honest or transparent, like you said. Someone keeps coming to you about promotions. You're like, you know what? We're talking about it in leadership. It's happening. Like, just stay with it for a little bit longer. I'll keep you updated. It's not right, and essentially as soon as it becomes the same story over and over and over again, that person will stop trusting you altogether. And that's usually the moment they start looking to leave. And, there's the hidden cost, and it truly is hidden because, executives and CEOs don't often think about this, of what is that cost between losing someone who's fully ramped, has the tribal knowledge, is plugged in and doing good work, and hiring someone new. I've had good and bad executive leaders in the past who have said things like, yeah, just let them go. We'll just hire someone else, versus someone who understands it and they're like, well, let's see what else we could do for them. And yeah, I think you nailed it perfectly. Last thing here that I want to get your take on. So I think this one's a little bit more fun, which is like team culture, and being able to, think beyond work, right? So where does that fit in for you in terms of like, how important is it to, if you're together, do team outings? If you're not together, have a way to bond with people on the team. Is that even something that like crosses your radar? And what do you do to help create that kind of environment?
Yeah, we're fully remote. So it is tough in terms of the meetups, but like I've encouraged the team to have like a players only chat, right? Where it's just them, no one else. We have our public chat, and then we have a private chat with the BDRs and me. I get on call blitzes with them. I have a stand up on Mondays, and then I have my one-on-ones with them, and I try to do an enablement session. And then sometimes I'll do like an impromptu, just brainstorm sesh when everyone's together. And I've tried to build a culture of leaning on each other to get help and being as one together. One of our co-founders, who I mentioned leads up our growth team, does like a team lunch, every other Friday with the team, or every 3 Fridays, just make himself available. But yeah, I also try to, in terms of like making it fun. We're doing spiffs. I'm introducing MVP of the quarter, competitions. We use ambition for that. It's like trying to like keep
Mm.
things fun. And like I've come up with like stupid little sayings like when someone books a meeting, I'm like, don't let the BDRs heat up, and like they love it, like I'm because I'm my goofy, authentic, fun self. It allows them to be like goofy and funny. Like yesterday, we were talking about cookies and like thinking of funny like subject lines and just like trying to have as much fun as possible. I think the other really important thing is to not be tone deaf. Like
Mm.
I will say in our meetings, like it is hard right now. Like I'm not trying to come up here with like motivational quotes. I'm like, hey, it's hard. Let's talk about it. Like, how are you doing? Like, one of my favorite questions to ask, um, once you've built the trust, is like, hey, how you been sleeping? Like, and I try to get to know their personal life a little bit. Like, how's your, how are you doing with your partner? Or like, what is your next vacation that's coming up? Or like, what are you doing this weekend? Without any judgment or without anything in return. Like,
Hmm.
making people feel like it's okay to take time off. I think that's another big thing. Like I have three people out tomorrow, and I didn't ask anything from them. I just said, "Hey, what are your plans?" And then I said, "Make sure you delete Slack in your email. Like, enjoy it, disconnect." And then I set the tone when I'm out to do that as well. So I think it's just like all these little things that add up. And again, it all comes from the person that's leading the charge being grounded and creating that environment and showing up from a place of, hey, like, number one, I've been there. I know it's hard. I feel it too. Um, Not to try to bring down any pressure on them that you may be getting, try to shield them from that.
Mm.
Um, Trying to like come up with like fun competitions and making sure they're utilizing their PTO, making sure that they're working together as a team, making sure that they celebrate each other, that they jump in and help when they have that email reply. It's all about having each other's back, and like our team really does that, which is awesome. The last thing I'll say is it's very easy for BDR when they're not doing well and someone on their team books a meeting to not celebrate that person and to get resentful. Like
Mm.
my team gets so pumped. They go off with the emojis like when someone books a meeting, and it's just a great feeling. Um, and definitely don't take responsibility for creating that culture, but it's just like a cool thing to watch your team um, naturally just like progress into this state. So yeah, I think that's a long-winded answer for your original question, but yeah,
No, an awesome answer. Well, Anthony, I mean, you hit it on the head there. And I just want to reiterate one of the really important things you said quickly, because I think that's a whole separate topic we could talk about, which is that you got to shield your team from the pressure you're feeling. So, one of the unspoken rules of good leadership is like, you have to buffer everything away from your team so that they can focus on their job, on their world, the things going on for them without the distraction of all the things that might be tense or intense with your leadership, with your boss. I can tell you horror stories about like situations where that wasn't the case. And what ends up happening is your team just feels stressed out and then they don't do their best work. But it sounds like the culture on your team at QA Wolf is incredible. And I know it is, you are the catalyst for it, not necessarily causing it, but you're doing a fantastic job. And it sounds like you're really on top of like best practices when it comes to being able to lead the way that you would probably want to work for someone like yourself.
yeah, I appreciate that, man. I still got a ton to learn and grow and learn, but I think having the awareness that that's the case is the piece of the puzzle that most people are missing.
Yeah, that's half the battle right there. I mean, you'll figure a lot of it out intuitively. Well, Anthony, tell us a little bit more about where people can connect with you, and anything else you want them to know.
Yeah, I want people to know to give yourself grace. This job is hard, and it's okay to ask for help if you're struggling. Please don't feel like you have to do it alone. And then if you want to connect, just hit me up on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Anthony Natoli, a leader of sales development over at QA Wolf. Thank you so much. Absolute pleasure having you on. We can have you back
Thanks,
soon.
man. 100%.
All righty.